Hello everyone, I hope your weekend is off to a great start. Thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to be doing 10 cards, 1 kit using the C&CT stamp April 2018 card kit. Lots to do, so we're going to jump in with card number 1. We're going to start off by stamping the largest butterfly in the stamp set, and I'm going to ink it up with some Memento Tuxedo Black ink. It's alcohol marker friendly ink. And since this video did run a little bit long, I skipped the coloring and the fussy cutting. But I did use some blues and greens to color in this butterfly. Once I have it fussy cut out, I went around the edges with my darkest blue Copic marker, and it gave it a real finished look. And I think it just turned out so pretty. Next, I'm going to take this pattern paper here. I'm going to use my stitched rectangle die and cut out a panel. Once I have my panel cut out, I'm going to do some stamping. I took the largest leaf flourish in the stamp set, and I'm going to stamp it a few times using Versamark ink. I'm also going to do that little corner down there. Once I have that done, we're going to grab our sentiment. The sentiment for this card I decided to use Thinking of You. And I'm going to stamp it with my Versamark as well. Now you can't see where I stamped, but once I add I added some C&CT stamp fine detail white embossing powder, and then you'll be able to see where I stamped. Kind of in that one corner, and then I did add the sentiment up in the left or the right side of this panel. Now once I have my embossing powder on there, I did go ahead and melt it. And then I thought that looked really pretty, but I thought to give it a little extra color, it would be nice to go in with my green markers. So I just used a couple green ones, and I'm adding a little bit of color to the very bottom portion of my leaves, and I think this makes them really stand out. Really like this effect. Now once I have all my leaves with a little bit of color, I did take a strip of the green pattern paper in the kit, and I trimmed it down to about a 1/4 inch strip, and then using my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive, I'm going to add that on the bottom portion of this panel. I'm going to trim off the excess here. That's Bubbles. He's in the front yard and he says hello. He's my rooster. Okay, I'm going to add some foam tape behind this panel, pop it up, and place it on a white card base. This is going to be a side folding card. Now once I have that placed, I'm going to add my butterfly, and I'm just going to use a glue dot. And then to keep my little butterfly wings a little bit fluffed up, I am going to add some foam tape behind each one of those wings. Now it will flatten if you are planning on mailing it, but it still has a little bit of dimension. Now for bells and whistles, I decided to take some, these are clear droplets from Pretty Pink Posh, and they're so pretty. They're like little water droplets. I'm just going to add, I have 2 different sizes, but I'm going to add a couple to my card, and that finishes off card number 1. Okay, now we're going to move along to card number 2. For card number 2, we're going to use the Distress Oxide ink. This is real pretty ink, and I wanted to use this brush. I was so excited about it. Now I use stencil brushes for my light blending, but I really like the storage options for this brush, and it worked out really well. I just inked up the very bottom portion of this white panel here, and now I'm going to use one of the butterflies in the stencil that came in the kit. I'm just going to cover the rest of them up with some masking tape here, and then using the squeeze lemonade that came in the kit, I'm going to color in that butterfly. Now I went really heavy with this oxide ink because I didn't want my butterfly to turn green. I wanted it to be real yellow, and it worked out really well. Now once I have that done, I'm going to go back in with the solid image on the stencil, and it's going to be slightly larger than my yellow butterfly there, and I kind of like that effect, and I decided to go in with some Nuvo Glimmer Paste. This is Moonstone, and it's a real pretty iridescent glitter paste. I'm going to go over the larger butterfly on that stencil, and it actually created a real pretty effect. It looked like almost like ice. Now Once we have our solid butterfly done, I'm going to set this aside to dry, and I think that looks so pretty. Next, I'm going to cut out a tag using one of my tag dies from the pattern paper that was in the kit. And then I was going to use a square for this card, but then changed my mind and decided to use a circle. I'm going to cut out my little butterfly here. Once we have that done, I'm going to kind of place it on my tag there. I decided to go in with a little bit of the squeezed lemonade on the edges of my circle. Since my tag had a little bit of a rainbow gradient, I thought it'd be pretty to add a little bit of a gradient on my little circle there. Now I'm going to take my crocodile and add a black eyelet to the very top of my tag. Once I have that done, I did pop up my little butterfly with some foam tape. I'm going to stamp the sentiment that says keep smiling. I'm just going to use my VersaFine ink. And this is going to go on a white card base. I did decide to go in with the my VersaFine ink and stamp a few of the solid butterflies that were in the stamp set. I added 2 small ones and 1 of the medium ones. I added some black twine to the top of my tag. And then for bells and whistles for this card, I decided to go in with some iridescent gems, or sequins. They actually coordinate with the glitter on the butterfly there. But that's card number 2. For card number 3, I'm going to take this butterfly that came in the stamp set, and I'm going to stamp it 4 times. Now again, I colored it in with my Copic markers, and then I also fussy cut them out. I just used some bright colors that kind of coordinate with the pattern paper that I'm going to use for this card. So blues, yellows, pinks, and purples. Now once I have them cut out, I'm going to create a shaker card for this card. I'm going to use the rainbow pattern paper here that's at a diagonal. Using a stitched rectangle die, I'm going to create a frame and just cut that out. Normally I don't use the back part of the die cut image, but I'm going to keep that center piece. We're going to use that for the backing. I'm going to add a piece of acetate just using my tape runner, and then I did add some foam tape behind the back. Now for my shaker element, I decided to go in with some clear confetti sprinkles. These are real pretty. They're not really sequins. They don't have no holes in them, but they're really pretty in multiple sizes, which is really nice. I'm going to add my rainbow background to the inside of my panel and then place a piece of white cardstock behind it. That way my shaker window has the rainbow continuing behind it. Okay, I think that looks fun. Now I'm going to add my butterflies. Just going to fluff them up a little bit. For my sentiment for this card, I chose the smaller sentiment that says you are simply the best. And using my VersaFine ink again, I'm going to stamp it on a piece of white cardstock. And I just trimmed it down. I did pop up my sentiment with some foam squares, and then I used some glue dots to adhere my butterflies. And I just added them to the left side of my panel here. Now for a little bit of shimmer, I did go in with some Nouveau crystal drops. These are White Blizzard. It's real pretty iridescent, just in the center and the antenna of the butterflies. And that finishes off that card. Now moving along to card number 4. I'm going to create a butterfly background. And to do this, I'm going to take, originally I have 3 butterflies here, but I end up only using 2. But I stamped the butterfly using my Memento Tuxedo Black ink. And then I decided to grab the swirly butterfly trail here. I'm going to ink that up and stamp that right underneath the large butterfly here. And then I'm going to take another smaller butterfly and I'm going to ink that up and stamp that on my panel. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a butterfly trail to that one. Now I'm going to do that all around the entire panel here. This is the butterfly I decided not to use, so I just used 2 different sizes. Now I wanted this background to be blue, so I'm going to take my blending brush here, and also I'm going to take the Mermaid Lagoon Distress Oxide ink that came in the kit, and just lightly shade the background. Now I colored all my butterflies in with my Copic markers again. I'm going to pop this panel up with some foam tape. And now for my sentiment, I decided to use the I Adore You. And I'm just going to cut that out using a stitch circle die from my stash. Once we have my sentiment cut out, I'm going to trim off the end here. Pop that up with some foam squares. And I'm going to place that towards the bottom right of this card. And I did place my panel on a white card base. For finishing touches, I did decide to go in with some more of the Nuvo Crystal Drops, the White Blizzard, around the circles on the butterflies and around the butterfly trails to give it a little bit of shimmer, and that finishes off that card. Now we're going to move on to card number 5. I chose the sentiment that's so pretty. It says, "You make me feel like I can fly." So I wanted to keep this card pretty simple. I'm taking the sentiment and the butterfly trail. I placed it in my mini Misty. Now we're going to ink that up with some VersaFine ink. And I paused a little bit, but I'm going to ink it up, stamp it, ink it up again, one more time. Now, I'm going to be using some embossing powder. I wanted to use some, this is Nuvo Crystal Clear embossing powder. I'm going to go over my images and go ahead and melt that embossing powder. Before I melt it, actually, I'm going to stamp another butterfly. I want to use the single-winged butterfly here that's on its side. Again, I'm going to ink it up with some VersaFine ink, add some clear embossing powder, and then I'll just melt all of those both together. Okay, I'm going to set this butterfly aside. We'll color that in a little bit. But for the background for this card, I wanted to use again the oxide inks that came in the kit. When I do the 10 cards, I try to use most elements that come in the kit. That way, if you guys want to follow along, it's easier. So, but I also try to make different cards for you guys. That way, you have a little bit of different inspiration. But I'm going to go around this entire panel with the Mermaid Lagoon Distress Oxide ink. And then I did go around the edges with the squeezed lemonade. I'm going to add some large water droplets to this panel. And the panel that I'm using is actually Bristol Smooth Cardstock. It blends so well with oxide inks. So we're going to set that aside. And I'm just using some pinks to color in this butterfly. Now, once I have that done, I wanted to use the foiling that came in the kit. So I'm going to use my Quickie glue pen and just go around little parts of my butterfly to give it a little bit of shimmer with the foiling. Now, normally, I guess with my Heidi Swap foil, it works great with the Nuvo glue pen. But when I tried it with the Gina K, it didn't work. So here you'll see, it just, I let it dry the way I was supposed to, and it still didn't pick up the foiling. So you can see here, it just picked up a little bit. So I'm going to grab my laminator. This is the laminator I picked up on Amazon. It's just a cheapy laminator. I'm placing my panel between a piece of regular printer paper, and I ran that through. And this actually worked really well. And actually I noticed when I did this that the foiling really stuck to my embossing area where I heat embossed it. So I think it looks really pretty, adds a little bit of shimmer and shine to my butterfly. And I'm going to use a glue dot to adhere it to the very top part of the butterfly trail there. And then I'll use a foam square behind it to keep it fluffy. Now, as I saw this, I thought, well, it looks very pretty, but it looks a little dull. So I thought, well, if the foiling stuck to the embossed area, I thought, well, maybe I'll give it a try and try to use the foiling on my sentiment and the butterfly trail. And it worked beautifully. So I took a piece of the foiling, placed it on top ran it through my laminator, and here you can see how shiny and really pretty it is. It actually has a rainbow effect to it, and I love the outcome of that. So the Gina K foiling works great if you use your embossing powder. I just reattached my little butterfly. Now we're going to flip this over to add some foam tape. I did add some little clear sequins around my panel, and just using a paper I flatten them so they lay kind of flat. But that finishes off that card. Okay, now for card number 6, we're going to do some stamping using the small leaf flourish in the stamp set. I'm going to stamp it 3 times with my Memento ink. Now I did color in my 3 leaves and the butterfly we're going to be stamping here. For this card I went with some pinks and oranges and yellows, and of course the leaves here are going to be green, but I just went ahead and colored them in and fussy cut everything out. I think they turned out so pretty. Now once we have that done, I'm taking this piece of white cardstock. Now this is a stitched dome. Let's see, stitched dome frame. It's going to cut out a frame on the inside. I cut out a panel with the yellow cardstock that came, or the pattern paper that came in the kit. And then I'm going to use the inside of the frame dome here and add a little bit of color just on one side. That's going to be where my butterfly is going to go, and I thought it'd be real pretty to add a little bit of shading. Now I'm going to go in with some yellow and white baker's twine around the bottom portion of my little dome there. Doubled it up and then tied a bow to the right. And I'm just going to use my tape runner and adhere that to my card base. And then I did add some foam tape behind my little frame there. And I placed that right on top of my shaded area. Now we're just going to arrange our little leaves in our butterfly. We're going to arrange them to the left. Once we have that done, now we need a sentiment. The sentiment for this card, I chose the small one that says "Today is a new day." And just using my VersaFine ink, I'm going to stamp that right inside that window. For a little bit of shimmer, I did decide to go in with some Nuvo Jewel drops. These are Lemoncello. And it's going to be real pretty because they dry clear. But that finishes off that card. Now, for card number 7, I wanted to do something fun. This is embossable plastic from Judikins. I'm going to take a butterfly and I'm going to stamp it on my plastic. I'm just going to remove the paper behind it. But I'm going to go in with my VersaFine ink. I wanted to create a stained glass window for this card. I think some of the butterflies in the stamp set just scream stained glass, so I thought it'd be fun to kind of create one. So once I have my butterfly stamped, I'm going to add some clear embossing powder. Now I did a big mess up. I should have added some anti-static powder tool to my plastic, and I didn't. And I think I got lucky. It didn't do too bad without the embossing tool, but that's okay. Okay, I heat set that. Now we're going to color in our butterfly. These are Nuvo Jewel drops, and they have a hint of color to them, but when they dry clear. So I thought they would be perfect to create like a stained glass butterfly. I just used some oranges, yellows, and pinks and blues. But when it dried, actually all you could really see was the orange and yellows. So I'm going to set that aside. It did take a long time to dry. But once it dried, well, while it's drying, I'm going to cut out a panel with my stitch rectangle die here, and I'm going to take a circle die that will fit my butterfly, and I'm going to cut out a window inside my panel. Now after I got that done, I am going to stamp the sentiment that says "Thinking of you" right in the very bottom. And for my sentiment, again, I'm just using my VersaFine ink. I'm going to stamp it right in the center. And the more I looked at it, the more kind of boring it was. So I decided to use, this is a link chain circle frame. Now it's going to cut out a real pretty link chain, so I'm going to place it directly on top of my circle, and then that way I have the scallop edging around it. And then I'm going to take a piece of black cardstock and cut out the link chain. And then this way I can put that black link chain right around the acetate for this card. Okay. Now my butterfly is just about done. I'll show you what this is going to look like here. Okay. Now, I think that looks so pretty. It's still a little bit wet, so I'm going to be very careful. But I'm going to add tape behind my frame here. And then I'm going to secure the acetate behind it. Just making sure my butterfly is right in the center. I'm going to trim off any acetate that's hanging over. And I think that's going to look really pretty, but still looks a little boring. So I decided to add a little color behind my butterfly. So I'm going to take another piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock, and I'm going to place it in my Mini Misty. I'm just going to be using my blending tool and add a little bit of yellow right in the center, just so it'll sit perfectly behind my butterfly. Now, to make my butterfly a little bit more intense in color, I decided to stamp that butterfly one more time right in the center of my yellow embossed area. And again, I'm going to use my VersaFine ink. I'm going to stamp it twice because I really want it nice and vivid and black. And you'll see once I put that butterfly behind my stained glass butterfly, it will really pop. And I love the way this turned out. I did trim that panel down a little bit so it fits behind my frame. But here you can see how bold it looks. I popped my frame up with some foam tape, and now I'm just sticking it to that panel. And I think that looks just so pretty. Okay, and for close-up pictures, guys, if you want to visit my blog, you can really see the detail on my blog. But I just placed my panel on my white card base. And now I'm going to go ahead and add my link chain frame. And I just use my glue to secure that to the acetate there. This is a very simple card, but I think it was so pretty. Love stained glass look. But that finishes up that card. Okay, now we're going to move along to card number 8. For card number 8, I'm going to take the largest stitched rectangle die that I have, and I'm going to take the size smaller, and I'm going to cut out a frame. This is going to be about a 1/4 inch frame. I'm going to keep that and set that aside, and now we're going to work on that panel behind it. I decided to go in with the stencil, and I am going to just kind of place it on my panel how I want the butterflies to look. Now for this card, I decided to go in again with the Distress Oxide inks that came in the kit. So I just secured my stencil using some tape there. I'm going to start off using the Mermaid Lagoon and just shading the very top portion of my butterflies. Careful not to overlap them on the other ones. But once I have that done, I'm going to go in with a squeezed lemonade on the very bottom portion. These butterflies will actually have 3 different tones. You'll have the blue, the yellow, and then when you mix them together, it creates a real pretty green. So I did use the solid image of the stencil and added a few more of the solid butterflies. Now for my sentiment, I decided to use some oxide ink again. This one is actually from my stash. It's Ice Spruce. I'm going to stamp the sentiment that says "Keep Smiling" towards the bottom there. And then I'm going to use the smaller sentiment that says "You can do it." I'm going to add a little bit of water to my Ice Spruce and then do a little bit of gray splattering on this panel. Next, I'm going to add a lot of shimmer using my shimmer spritz. This is Sparkle Shimmer Spritz, and I'm just going to spray it a few times, and it's going to create a real shiny background. Just to speed up drying process, I use my heat gun, but you can see the sparkle, how pretty that is. Okay, I'm taking a small circle stitch die here. I'm going to cut out a little window, and then using my ice spruce, I'm going to stamp a gray butterfly on a piece of white cardstock here. Once I have that done, I'm going to go in some more with that sparkle shimmer spritz. We're going to add a little sparkle to that gray butterfly. And I thought that butterfly would look really pretty in that little circle window. Once that's just about dry, I did pop up my panel with some foam tape. Well, I'm going to adhere my frame first. This frame, I'm going to use my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive and just glue that directly to my card base. I think the frame will add a lot of detail to my card, and I like the stitching on it. Once I have my frame down, here's where I went in and I popped up my butterfly panel here. And then I did add my gray butterfly to my card base, making sure that it'll be centered. I'm going to place my butterfly panel on my card base. And I think that looks so pretty. For finishing touches, I did go in with some Nuvo Jewel Drops. These are key lime. And it looks so pretty, especially when they dry clear. I think it just flows so nice. Especially with the little sparkle on this panel. Excuse me, but that finishes off that card. Now for card number 9, I'm going to take 3 of the pattern papers in the kit. Now this is the largest butterfly that came in the stamp set. I'm going to stamp 1 on each one of these pattern papers. And the nice thing about this butterfly is it can be layered. There's 3 different layers on this butterfly. So I'm going to fussy cut out the solid image of the pink butterfly. And then I'm going to go in 1 layer on the yellow, and then I'll go in to the 3rd layer with the purple pattern paper. And I think this is a really, in real life it turns out so pretty. It's almost like paper piecing, but you're doing it with the butterfly, and the dimension that it gives is so pretty. I'm just going to use a glue dot to layer all 3 together, and I think that looks so fun. Okay, now we're going to set that aside. Next, I'm going to take this rainbow pattern paper. I cut out a strip. It's about a 2-inch strip. I'm going to trim it down just a little bit so it fits on my card base. And then I'm going to go in with a stitch circle die. Now, I found one that fit my butterfly the perfect size, and then I grabbed the size larger. I'm going to cut out a half circle on my rainbow pattern. And then I'm also going to use that smaller circle and cut out a black circle. Now I'm going to adhere my rainbow pattern directly to my card base, and then we're going to use my anti-static powder tool to stamp our sentiment using Versamark ink. I'm stamping the sentiment that says "Stay Strong." And then I'm just going to go in with some C&CT Stamp Fine Detail White embossing powder and go ahead and melt that. Once that's done, I popped up my circle with some foam squares. I'm going to add a foam square behind my little butterfly and place it right next to the sentiment. And then I did embellish this card with some sparkling clear sequins. And I went over the center of my butterfly with some Nuvo Jewel Drops, Crystal Drops. These are silver lining. And that finishes off that card. Now for my final card, I kind of lost a little bit of footage for this last card, guys. I don't know what happened. Okay, but I'm going to start off by doing a little bit of stamping. I'm going to stamp the large leaf flourish on a piece of white cardstock. And then for this flourish, I decided to go in, I had some green embossing powder. Now, if you don't have green embossing powder, of course, you can stamp it green, and then using your clear embossing powder, it would give the same effect. But I thought the green would be a little bit different. So I'm just going to use that. And then I also stamped 2 of the butterflies, and then heat embossed it with some silver embossing powder. Now I'm just going to color in my butterflies with the oxide inks. going to use blue, yellow, and then I colored, added a little green by mixing both those colors together. Now I did add another one of the leaf flourish, but I ended up not using the second one. But I'm going to trim down a piece of this pattern paper. I only wanted the greens and the blues and the yellows. Now I'm going to adhere that, and then I did cut out a panel using the green pattern paper here. Now here is where I lost the footage, but I did add the stripe pattern paper to the bottom, kind of arranged my butterfly, and I used the sentiment that says "Have a beautiful day," and I stamped it using silver embossing powder as well. But those are the 10 cards that I made today. I hope this gives you some ideas on how to use the kit. Thank you so much for stopping by, guys. I love to hear your comments, and I appreciate them all so much. Let me know what you think. I think this kit is a beautiful kit. I love butterflies. I think it was really fun and feminine, and I really had a blast creating with these cards. And again, for close-ups, visit my blog or Instagram. I use a different camera, so the pictures are a little bit different. But I hope this gives you a little bit of inspiration with this kit. Thanks so much for stopping by, guys. I wish you a fantastic weekend, and we will see you again real soon. Bye-bye.